Hey guys, today we're going to talk about 3 easy ways you can get better at sales right now. So I'm excited to talk about this one because sales is one of the topics that I'm the most passionate about, and that's partially because so many people misunderstand it. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who have definitely some kind of negative perception of sales or salespeople, and that's just amazing to me because every single one of us, if you're watching this video right now, you sell on a daily basis. If you've ever tried to convince somebody to go see a certain movie with you and they wanted to go see a different one, that's sales. If you've ever had an idea, hey, let's go out to this restaurant tonight, and everybody else was just kind of like, I'm kind of comfortable hanging out here, but you ended up going to the restaurant. You sold them on going to the restaurant. So it's a term we've given some negative meaning to over time, but it doesn't really deserve the negative meaning. It's one of those things where a couple of, one rotten apple spoils the bunch. And so what I want to do today is talk about 3 ways you can get better at sales, because sales is really, it's the lifeblood of any business, of any entrepreneur. If you can't sell anything, you might as well never open your doors, because that's what makes the whole thing go around. So let's talk about 3 easy ways you can do this. The first is to do what's called assume the sale. And hopefully you can read my handwriting here. Assume the sale, that's number 1. So what this essentially means is that you'd be surprised how many people out there, they'll do things like, they'll explain all the benefits of something and everything, and they'll get you in this conversation, you'll be talking to them, and then next thing you know, they go, I mean, you can buy it if you want, it's, it is what it is, do you want it? And it's just this awkward conversation where it just kind of like feels like you're not even really sure if they're sure that you should do this. And so the far more effective method, and by the way, if you don't believe in what you're selling, you shouldn't even be selling it in the first place, because we really are selling in order to help people meet needs. That's what we do in entrepreneurship. We create things that meet needs that people have. So you want to make sure you're selling something you believe in, but when you are sure, let's say that you have a problem and I know I can fix that problem, I need to be confident about how I'm helping you fix that problem. When it comes to the point where you and I both know you need it, I need to be confident in offering it to you. So for example, that would look something like this. Instead of us getting to the end of a sales conversation where, we're talking about the product or whatever, and we've come to the conclusion that you do need it, and I've answered all your questions, a lot of people would go, so what do you think? You want to do it? And that just kind of doesn't feel that great, right? The better way to do it would be what's called assuming the sale, which would be like, well, man, it sounds like from what you've told me, this could be actually a perfect fit. And based on what I told you earlier with the 30-day money-back guarantee, there's really not even any risk anyway. So why don't I go ahead and get your address and your phone number? And that's really like half of what I need to get the order in the system and get you started on this whole thing. Sound good? And when you say it like that, it sort of assumes that, and you can even take that further. You can even say, great, well, it sounds like we got a deal. What's your address, right? And then by saying that, as soon as they give you their address, they're kind of agreeing to go down that path with you. That's assuming the sale, and if you've never tried it before, it really, really, really works. Some people, when I've explained this concept, I'll just throw this out there, have said, oh, that sounds manipulative. Well, if you just went through an entire conversation and they just told you exactly what they wanted and you just helped them find a way to solve that problem at a price they're willing to pay by basically taking what you're offering, then how is it manipulation to help them meet that problem? It's not. The problem with salespeople who do feel manipulative is that they're trying to do it for their own gain. They're trying to offer you something you don't really need, and they're trying to trick you into thinking you need it. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about not getting in the way of a customer who is trying to fix a problem that you're able to fix for them. You don't want to get in their way. That's not in their best interest or yours. So that's number 1, assume the sale. Number 2 is what's called the upfront contract. Again, messy writing here, upfront contract. So this is really just a fancy term for saying that we're basically going to get people to agree to certain terms verbally before we even really get to where we want to ask them for the sale. So what that would look like is something like this. Let's say we start in the conversation, there's a little bit of interest, and I say, you know what, okay, so let me make sure I understood. You just finished telling me all about what it is you're looking for and the features you want, the benefits you need, the things that you're concerned about or whatever, I think I understand everything you're talking about. So if I'm able to do A, B, and C without D happening, but I can throw in E and F for free, then we'll have a deal. Is that accurate? I just want to make sure we're on the same page. That's an upfront contract. If that person says yes to that, then essentially a couple different things happen. Number one, it gets the momentum moving in the direction of the sale. So if I pose that question to you and you say yes, and then we dig in and we find out that I actually am able to do everything that I mentioned, then you're going to feel in many ways like you broke your word and you went back on what you had said if you don't say yes at that point, if you don't continue with the sale, because you essentially laid it all out. So at that point, if you still say no to me, you're either being hypocritical, or you were lying to me in the first place, or there's an objection or something like that you haven't really brought up yet. There's something like, oh, there's this other factor I didn't tell you about that, I is making me really kind of wary of this whole thing. Which brings us really to the second reason why you want to use an upfront contract. Sometimes people won't tell you those little hidden objections they've got in their mind of why they don't want to buy, or why they think they won't want to buy. When you ask the question, hey, if I'm able to give you this thing that you want that's better than what you have right now, and I'm able to do it for even cheaper than what you're already paying for the solution you have now, is there any reason why you wouldn't move forward with this? That kind of tends to flesh out a couple of things that maybe they didn't really bring up before. Things like, well, not necessarily, because even though I don't really like this solution I've got right now, it's, the salesperson was my niece and I really want to support her. Then you get into those other conversations where it either is a deal killer or it's something that you can tackle, right? Objections are just where the sale starts, right? It's most of the time there's going to be an objection or two where they're going to be like, oh yeah, I do want it, but I'm a little nervous about this thing, or I'm kind of curious about that, or could you explain more about how this works? The purpose of an upfront contract is to sort of get you on the same page so that you're headed toward an agreement. It's to get them in a state of momentum toward the sale, and also to make sure that you're covering all those objections and fleshing all of them out so you can deal with them and move forward effectively. The upfront contract really, really works. When I started using that, it changed everything. Now, I will tell you, it works a lot better on smaller items that you can sell on the spot than it does larger items. If you're selling a six-figure contract that's going to have to go through a year of negotiations, it doesn't really work quite as well. If you're selling something that's maybe $300 or less, somewhere in that range, can tend to work really well. So give it a shot. Let me know how it works for you. But essentially, again, it comes down to, if I'm able to do A, B, and C without D, E, and F, is there any reason you wouldn't be ready to move forward? Something along those lines. It really, really works. The third thing that you can do to become better at sales right now is to focus on benefits versus features. I know like 10 of you are going to comment on my bad handwriting right now, but just deal with it. One of the things that I see people do all the time is they focus on features rather than benefits. So for example, if you're selling me a drill, we talk about this example all the time, so I'll just touch on that again right now. If you're selling me a drill and you start talking about, oh, the inner components are this many millimeters by this many millimeters, and it weighs 2.8 ounces, and you're telling me all these features of it, but that doesn't really help me understand what the experience of using the drill is going to be like and why it's going to be better than maybe another drill. That doesn't really help me envision how awesome it's going to be to have a new drill when maybe I have an old one at home, there's something I don't like about it or whatever. So you always want to focus on benefits rather than features. Benefits are things like this drill, it feels like there's so much power in your hand. And something that would have taken you like 5 minutes to do with an old drill, this thing is like one press of a button and you're done. Like you barely even have to start and the whole project's finished. Like you start painting this picture of the benefits of having this shiny new drill. It's so much better than any drill that's ever come out before. And you know what those are, and you help the customer experience visually or mentally or whatever in their own mind, in their own imagination, the benefits of having that new drill. So again, most people focus on features instead of benefits. The whole the drill, if you will, rather than the hole. People buy a drill because they want a hole not of a certain size, not because they want a drill. And so focus on the benefits. And really this, a similar concept that goes hand in hand with this is the concept we talk about all the time of that people buy things based on emotion, and then they seek to justify that purchase logically, with logic. So you might hear somebody say, well, for example, here's something we've talked about many times as well. If you want to buy a new BMW, you're probably not buying a BMW just for its reliability, right? Because you can get a pretty reliable car for like a third of the cost. But reliability is something you probably give yourself as a logical reason why it was a smart decision for you to spend $65,000 on the BMW. So you might say, oh, it's a very reliable car, it's got very high safety ratings, all those types of things. But the thing that persuaded you to buy the BMW was not its safety ratings and reliability. Trust me, it was not. So those things tipped you over the edge. They made you feel like you were making a responsible decision, but they didn't motivate you. What motivated you was the thrill of the speed, the way that you imagined it would make you feel about how you're making progress in life, about your adequacy in your career or whatever, or the way your friends were going to think about you, the way you're going to look when you're pulling into the mall's valet parking, So you're thinking about these sorts of things, and this feeling, this anticipation of the way it's going to change your experience of life is that emotional driver that's really making you want to buy that BMW. Everything else is logical justification. It's the thing that allows you to defend this decision and make it make sense to yourself and those around you who you care about. So boil that down, you get back to benefits versus features. Features is like the logic, benefits is like the emotion. So if you focus on this when you're selling something, then you're going to find that you're talking about things that your potential customers care about a lot more, and not just boring them and talking their heads off until they eventually tell you they're not interested, which isn't fun for anyone. So hopefully you've really enjoyed these easy ways to get better at sales. All three of them are things you can apply immediately. So if you're in a sales industry or looking at becoming an entrepreneur or anything like that where you're going to be selling, definitely try implementing these. By the way, these go way past business and entrepreneurship. You can assume the sale when you're trying to get your significant other to go out to a movie, right? You can use an upfront contract when you're trying to convince somebody to, do whatever, right? So if what you're telling me is I can do this and I'm willing to do this, then you'll be willing to do that. If they say yes, then you basically have the ball in your court. All you have to do is be willing to do it, and they're willing to do that, right? So that's upfront contract. And then of course, focusing on the benefits. You can focusing on the benefits is the biggest part of persuasion, really. It's helping other people want to do what you want them to do. It's not forcing them to do something or convincing them to do it against their will. That's no fun. You want to get them to the place where they want to do it. And that really comes to my favorite definition of sales, which is really partnering with other people and their wallet to help them solve a problem that they have. It's not me versus them and their wallet. It's me and them and their wallet versus a problem. So again, hope you've enjoyed this. Comment below with your thoughts and questions. Can't wait to hear what you think. Talk to you soon.